Hello, everybody. Hi. Hi, Javier.
Hi, Michael.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
I'm glad you're here with me. Hi, everyone who's watching. My name is Michael. This is my little live stream show, the Messy Desk series, and I'm very excited to have Javier Jara here with me today. So this is going to be a fun one. Thanks for
Yeah,
making
I'm
time
pumped.
to. Yeah,
What are we going to talk about?
we're going to talk
I have
about
no
lots
idea.
of stuff. I'm not sure either. I mean, I'm the host, and even I don't know. But I was wondering if you could just say a little hi to people and tell me what you do, who you are, or tell them what you do, who you are.
Sure.
Little.
So I guess what you would call a classical guitarist or just a guitarist, pluck string aficionado. I am, I don't know. I have lived in San Francisco for a while. I lived in Europe for a while. I'm from the US. I'm from Minnesota. And yeah, I like playing guitar. Pretty much is all there is to it.
Nice, nice. Actually, that leads very nicely into my main gotcha question I ask people right away. You say you're a classical guitarist or just a guitarist. I find that interesting. How do you define classical guitar? What is it for you? How do you like?
Mm, yeah,
What
that's
do
a
you
good
tell people
question.
when they don't know what it is? You know?
Uh, yeah, that's usually like when people don't know what it is or they have no idea. I have to give a different answer. But for the purpose of this conversation, I'll give you the real answer, which is that
Okay.
uh, Andres Segovia coined the term classical guitar himself to separate it and protect it from modern developments in music that were happening after World War II.
Mm,
Experimental music, just the avant-garde, but also developments of the electric guitar and things that he wasn't very fond of. So it's a way of protecting that older instrument, but it's also a way of kind of isolating it, alienating it. So it's a kind of a plus and a minus, but I would say.
mm. Interesting. Matilda Opitzi says, ciao. Hi, Matilda. Nice to see you here. She was on last week or 2 weeks ago. Um,
Honest.
Everyone in the chat, if you have questions, please put them in there and tell us if our audio is strange, if I'm too loud or Javier is too loud or vice versa. Um, yeah, so I mean, I guess that's a good way of looking at it too, because I know it was an invention a little bit of Segovia's, and I mean the shadow of Segovia kind of sticks with us, right, in the repertoire that he commissioned and he chose to play. Do you think that that attitude of wanting to protect the instrument and sort of keep it almost in the past, it sounds like, do you think that had to do with what he chose to play from living composers and how he worked on commissioned repertoire?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot to be said there because there were plenty of composers who really wanted to write for him. But he was, for one, very proud of the fact that he never paid any money for his compositions, which is also why,
Hmm.
some of those great composers, Stravinsky and Ravel, who wanted to write for him and just needed a little bit of dough, whether it was shelled out by a donor or Segovia himself, he wasn't willing to do that. But it was also probably because they were too modern for his taste.
Right.
And so that's a common criticism, but it's also, I mean, you have to call it something
Yeah.
because it's like this thing of playing with nails but also Segovia's development of finding a nylon string guitar and starting with gut strings and
Mm-hmm.
developing nylon strings with Augustine in
Mm-hmm.
1947.
Nice.
And it's really, I think it's a way that separates it nicely, but I think a lot of people, myself included, don't like the term because we don't exactly play classical music to that extent. Like we're
Mm-hmm.
outside of history, and in some places there are composers like Ponce who compose great works, but they're really outside of the general flow of music history, and they
Mm-hmm.
belong in a different kind of area.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really complicated. It's hard to know what to take out of that, but it's also realizing that it's a guitar like any other guitar, and you could play other guitars, but me with electric guitar, I'm just not particularly talented. And I've started to get into a few more contemporary works for electric guitar that are really great. Like there's some Romatelli that, like Crash TV Trance, that piece is, I think, a masterpiece. And some other pieces for electric guitar by contemporary composers who were writing it at the same time that Segovia was alive.
Mm-hmm.
And they're, if you consider, like, even the musique concrète, they were doing a lot of experimentation with electric guitar right after Les Paul was doing
Mm-hmm.
multi-tracking, and I think that was really to protect himself and what he saw as his values, uh, and his instrument, besides the fact of the type of music, because that's kind of separate than the actual music that he was choosing to play. you know. So I think he is separating it stylistically just to find more neo-romantic, neo-baroque repertoire that didn't exist and creating this kind of false history. But he was also
Hmm.
just separating it to define it in a way. But I don't know what else you would call it, you know.
Yeah,
Nylon
I mean,
string guitar, maybe.
yeah, there isn't really a good replacement term. I mean, my main issues with the term are pragmatic ones, in the sense of, like you said, when you tell someone you play classical guitar, they think that you mean you play classical music, and most of us don't play that much classical music.
Mm. Yeah.
Some of us do, but like a big chunk of us don't. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's just interesting. I mean, I guess that's the problem with classical music as a term in general, not just classical guitar. For like
Yeah,
talking to
because
someone,
it's a period, but also sort of a genre that
yeah.
you separate from pop music and
Hmm.
but classical period music, that's like the one period where we have the least amount of repertoire, like the
Yeah,
least strength and
for sure. Yeah, and it becomes tricky about what you classify things as. I mean, I recorded recently a piece by my friend in Vancouver, a composer named Alfredo Santana, and it's for
mm,
9 electric guitars, and it has like aleatoric elements, but the
cool.
score is
Yeah.
written as a classical piece would be written. All the markings,
Mm.
it's all the notation, all that. So it's just like when people
Yeah,
ask
there
what is
and that is the notation side. It's not like the notation belongs to us, but I know plenty of really great electric guitarists who don't read music.
Yeah, exactly. So I find it a little problematic too, and I struggle a little bit personally with this. Like, is my identity a classical guitarist or just a guitarist? I guess in my case, I choose to teach various styles, not just classical guitar, and I also like to play and record, other genres on electric guitar too. So there's that.
Hmm.
But I really only perform classical guitar, and that's what mainly my training is in. So it's just hard to parse that sometimes, even if you just play classical guitar music, just because the term, yeah,
Yeah.
doesn't encompass everything.
I mean,
What is
what I love about the instrument, if I get into that, is just that that's different from electric guitar or steel string guitar because the in part you have steel strings where the tension is so high that you don't get as much variation in color and in dynamic
Mm-hmm.
range. And there's this sensitivity which the guitar as a pluck string instrument is so it's just for me it's the best. It's as a solo instrument, it
Mm-hmm.
really exposes what's inside. And
Mm-hmm.
if someone's playing classical guitar for me, usually I can understand a lot more about them than if they were speaking to me, you know.
Yeah, I would argue that's definitely true, but I also think that the same is true for electric guitar in certain contexts because there are
Mm.
certain things you can express through that that you can't really through a classical guitar, especially with things like doing solos with like bends and a lot of that kind of stuff. That's you can hear so quickly who an electric guitarist is when you hear their solo. If
Mhm.
they're playing. Sorry, I'm just gonna open a window because it's warmer in here than I thought, and I hope it's not too loud. If people can hear the street noise, just tell me. Um, yeah, but I would tend to gravitate towards only playing classical or nylon string guitar when I'm playing anything acoustic in the sense of not amplified, or electric guitar if I wanted to play that. But yeah,
Yeah, you just f up your nail. I mean, what's the deal with swear words on this?
you can say whatever you want. Yeah, you fuck
Okay,
up your
but
nails. Yeah,
you'd fuck up your nails basically.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, there's that. I mean, I use fake nails, so actually it's
Oh,
nice
okay.
because
Yeah, you're good then.
I can take them off, and if I want to do some hybrid picking on the electric guitar, I'm not going to totally
So
screw
you're
them up. So.
committed fake nails.
Yeah, I have like terrible like divots in my nails, and I know I could probably fix them with the right diet and all that stuff. But like that plus,
That's hard though. It's
I
really
just and I hate being reliant on my natural nails for concerts and stuff or recording. Like I hate getting to a recording, session or getting to a gig and being like, this nail is too short. Guess I'm just gonna have to deal with it.
yeah, or God forbid you break one, you know.
Yeah.
It
So
happens
I
too.
I really like the assurance I have of always putting on the nail that I made that morning.
Yeah, you know,
Um,
that might be the future, especially if we get new technology where players like yourself, if
mhm.
you develop ways of making it better and better. Because for me, when I stick on whatever I know, which is like a ping pong ball or an acrylic, it's just it just feels strange. It's like on top of my nail, and I'm not used to it, and I
Yeah.
just don't get the same. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you have to acclimatize to it. So it doesn't work. I don't think it works very well as like a, you know, uh, band-aid solution in a certain circumstance because it feels so foreign, but it works well if you do
Yeah.
it consistently. Anyhow,
Mhm.
yeah, interesting. I mean, it's also interesting to think about the classical guitar from the standpoint of the instrument itself because it has also changed so much in the last 100 years. Like, you think about the kind of guitars, that existed in the early 20th century compared to the ones now. And then Segovia doing nylon strings was obviously a new development, but now we've got carbon and all these other things. So it's interesting that people think our instrument might be sort of archaic, but it's actually very modern. The ones that most people are playing now, anyways.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. Like I've played completely carbon fiber guitars where there's like no wood on it.
Yeah,
They're just
crazy.
a cannon that shoots out sound. It's nuts. And I would really consider playing those in certain situations. I'm kind of a traditionalist myself. I play a traditional instrument. I didn't always used to be like that. I used to play a lattice top, but I've gone more towards the traditional side of things. But a guitar nonetheless with a little bit more modern oomph to it, and that can get me further.
I think context is everything, right? I mean, I guess certain people like certain things for their playing, but there's also the issue of like, what repertoire do you play? And space. Space. Yeah, both of those things. And it's the same with strings. I mean, people like to sort of do the team carbon, team nylon type thing, but then, it's like, it really depends on the guitar and also your nails and your playing.
It really does. I used to do exclusively carbon, and sometimes I go back to carbon, but now I'm kind of all nylon, just because if I'm playing a more traditional instrument, it just sounds better that way.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I would never put carbon on this Dominelli. Wait, there. Yeah,
right,
but I use them on my lattice cedar guitar because they sound great on that guitar.
Yeah, nylon would probably sound like a deterioration on a modern guitar like that a little bit.
Exactly, and it just makes a lattice cedar like that guitar too woofy,
Too dark.
For me at least. Yeah, too dark. Anyhow, shall we maybe listen to some of your playing? We could play some Takamitsu maybe, or the Dowland. What do you want to play here?
Dowland sounds good.
Dowland. Okay, this is a newer recording, right? You did this recently.
Yeah, home pandemic recording.
Nice. Just like everybody else has been forced to do.
Exactly.
Nice. Well, we can talk about that after. But this is Dowland's Farewell, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you want to say anything about this, the recording, the piece?
Just I think when the isolation started, I think I found a lot of comfort in Dowland, especially in this piece, just because it's so personal and there's so much that can be expressed. And I find it. I mean, I've played other Dowland works which are more virtuosic, but this is incredibly difficult in some senses, which I find just this chromatic line, almost like a fugue that keeps going up. And
yeah.
Cool. Yeah, it's interesting you say that because there was definitely a period towards the end of the pandemic when I was finishing. Well, the pandemic was sort of just starting when I was finishing my master's, and there was a period where like I was so stressed out, plus the pandemic was happening, and I was only listening to Dowland, and then I started playing Dowland even though it wasn't on my final exam because I was like, I just need to do this to stay sane, you know?
Yeah, exactly. The king of melancholy. How do you express it? It's,
I was like, I should be practicing. Yeah, I should be practicing the Chaconne, but I'm gonna play this Dowland fancy instead. Okay, let's listen to you play Farewell here.
Beautiful, Javier. Very nice.
I didn't hear it. I don't know if it was good or not.
I didn't hear it now, but I heard it earlier when I listened to it, so I can say that
Okay,
legitimately.
nice.
Ricardo Saeb says beautiful. Semper Dowland, Semper Dolens. Yes, exactly. And Chaz
Always sad, always Dowland.
Yeah, exactly.
Or is it sad? Or what does that translate to? I forgot.
Yeah. Chaz McKelly on YouTube says, "Are you reading off the lute tablature, and how much did you have to change to translate this to guitar?"
Yeah, I am reading off of the lute tablature, and there are just a few moments which are kind of tricky because you have to raise where Dowland has a 7th string, so all the strings are the same if you just tune to F sharp, but that 7th string sometimes will rarely come in, and then you have to move it up an octave.
Mm-hmm.
And that, you usually have to go around some musical solutions of really digging into it or something to make it. Usually if he's representing like a chromatic line and finally gets to the lowest register, then it has some impact, and that's a shame on a 6-string guitar.
Yeah. Yeah, I ran into that a little bit while playing Dowland, but also it's sort of a different situation, but you have the same problem when you work on Scarlatti, right? Like harpsichord music, and when do you bring the octave up? That's a real nail-biting decision sometimes.
Yeah, no, it is. It really is.
Yeah. Chaz is also asking, what mics do you use with your Scarlett, your Focusrite?
Those were 2, what are they? They're Octava MK012s.
Okay.
Which are, the affordable mic that I got during the pandemic.
Nice.
It was on sale. I really want to upgrade to some really nice mics. That would be so cool. But
yeah,
nice mics are expensive.
Yeah, I dropped some money on some Aston Starlights, which were like, they're sort of from a friend who uses them. He recommended them because they're sort of poor man's Neumanns,
Nice.
They were like,
look that up. Yeah,
they were like 900 euros for the pair, which is expensive, but not like.
That's not bad, honestly.
Yeah, not like
small diaphragm condensers.
Yeah, and it's a pair, so.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyways, so but I feel the pain of trying to pick mics because you just want to go with what you think will sound best, but the price tag sometimes is prohibitive.
Yeah, and you can't even try them.
Yeah, there's that too, unless you have friends who have them. But yeah, Chaz says, I tried learning this on lute. It's tough. It does seem tough. I don't know how different it would be on lute, though. I've never played lute, so.
Lute stuff. That's what I think it is.
Yeah.
Say that as a guitarist, but
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I have a hard time playing lute too.
Yeah. So Javier, I'm wondering if you have, since we were talking about sort of, repertoire, our identity as guitarists, how was your journey as a student picking repertoire, and what advice do you have for people trying to pick repertoire to study or to learn or to put in their concert programs?
Yeah, I think it's part of everybody's personal journey that you eventually figure out what speaks to you and what you have a voice with and what you're good at playing. And for me, I love Dowland. I love Takamitsu, and I really like spending my time on that, and I don't really tire of it. I think that's an incredibly important thing, and it's when you do competitions and sometimes whatever school things that you have required music. Honestly, I've thought about that, and the advantage is, yeah, you get to hear everybody play the same thing, but I really don't think everybody's suited to the same thing. I don't think everybody should be suited to the same thing.
Yep.
And I just, the last couple of days, I adjudicated the youth GFA competition for like under 18. And, incredible players all around the world. And but the set piece is Villalobos. It's a piece by Villalobos. It could be, one of the 5 popular pieces, one of the 12 etudes, one of the 5 preludes, but everybody chooses Etude 7. I don't know why everybody does that, but there's this thing that people, I don't know if it's that they want to do what they think has worked in the past, but usually that's not what it becomes. Not tiresome to hear it, but it's like you really have to have your own voice. You have to have something to say with the piece. But in just terms of playing Villalobos, I like my Villalobos. I think it should be kind of radical because that's the character he was, and that's the technique that it demands. Is this really a technique that's completely unlike Segovia or traditional guitar technique, and it's so intense. And some players are great at doing that, and some aren't, and they'll be great at doing their free choice piece, but not at. And they'll be like too tame during Villalobos,
Yeah.
And that's not a discredit towards them. It's just that's more what speaks to them, and that's their style.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Well, my issue with sort of set repertoire being always present in every event or program or whatever is that it signals to players that we should emerge from our degrees all knowing the same kinds of things and all having the same kind of program to offer the world, which I think incentivizes the wrong things to create like artists, you know. I understand that people need a certain level of proficiency in, you know, sort of standard rep, especially if they want to teach and stuff. But at the same time, my issue is that I see a lot of people emerging even at the master's level or the doctorate level who have like essentially the same program as other people, and it's sort of a shame because I think, you know, developing an artistic personality is probably going to serve you in the long run more as an artist. But I would venture to guess in a situation where everyone's choosing Villalobos Etude 7 could be because of sort of the phenomenon of being a competition player, right? Where like that's often required, that piece. And it's also one that seems to people think works well in competitions because you can show off your scales essentially, right? And I guess that's my other issue with sort of competitions in general is that like not that they're bad, but just that they kind of create this situation where we end up perpetuating the same repertoire and the same pieces by well-known composers, when even those well-known composers have pieces that are wonderful that just don't get heard, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. It's like fashion. It's fast fashion, and then like something you notice, it's fashion, and then it goes out of fashion, and it comes back 10 years later, and everybody's playing it again.
Yeah.
And I also think that the other thing about those competitions, what it trains us to do um, is to constantly add things to music, is to constantly add dynamics, color, anything you can possibly do, so it's at the maximum capacity.
Yeah.
And that's not always the nicest thing to listen to because certain sections in music need to be simple. They need to have sometimes it's better to just do nothing rather than be doing all these things. So yeah, that's my problem with competition players too. Sometimes I'm just like, whoa, slow down. What are you like doing all this stuff?
Trying to pack so much flavor into something that you end up not tasting anything, right? So
spice. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to sort of denigrate doing competitions as a way to improve your repertoire and improve your visibility and all that. It's just I wonder what about the incentives it gives young players, you know. And I think there is a disconnect between that and getting out into the world and getting on a real stage and playing for a real audience, you know.
Yeah, and you know what? After me, I'm a example of that because I, as a young player, really that was the only platform I had. I think it was to get recognized through competitions. And I remember when I did the GFA tour, it was like I was constantly changing my program, and then, you know, this is a volunteer organization. It was like never getting there on time, and then the program would be wrong. But it was because I was realizing what was working, what wasn't working, and I went through this kind of like almost like a crisis where I it's like what am I doing this for? And I came to the conclusion that of tradition and how we all do these concerts and how basically what competition sometimes trains us to do is to be an individual or to be separate from the pack, to be a unique virtuoso. But we all have learned something from others, and it's not creation is never just a unique individual thing. It's always an evolution. There's always some sort of person who came before to teach them, and that gives me immense comfort when I play concerts because I know it's not just about me, and it's just I'm this number in the line, and I can just keep going, and it's a normal thing. It's a so yeah, I've felt that certainly.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's hard because you put in this comparative situation all the time in school and in festivals and in competitions. And I also don't really blame players where that's the main place they're getting to play because it's hard to find other stages, you know. It's not there's not an abundance of opportunities all the time. So, anyhow, interesting. But like, do you think that school programs should sort of push players to think in a different way at an earlier stage, or like when do you think a player should be starting to think about what repertoire fits and works for them? You know?
Yeah, well, part of it is there's some teachers who they really give rep, right? They're just like you should play this, and you should be able to play this standard rep and this standard rep and this standard rep, and that sometimes works to an extent if you need that, but it's really complicated because I think there has to be personal motivation behind it all the time.
Mhm.
Like if you're just playing something because you don't want to, then you feel like you're just trying to believe that you want to play it.
Right.
But that's always artificial. It's never completely real, and it has to feel natural. I feel like if you're motivated to play something, it's because you like it, it's because you want to do it. And
Mhm.
that's the most important thing with learning, is just that for me, that I constantly find motivation through inspiration, through the arts, and then I can push myself forward. Otherwise, if I don't have that, I stay still and I stay stagnant.
Mhm. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's hard though, because when you're a young player, it's hard to like find that inner drive, that motivation from yourself or from, yeah,
Yeah, or to feel it develop, to push it forward. Yeah. And
yeah.
then if you're a younger player, then it's kind of like, yeah, it's hard. Sometimes I'll give my students listening exercises for that very reason, because it's
Mhm.
just like, you just need to listen to more music. I mean, you don't know any music, so you got to listen to some, and then you'll figure out what you like, and then we can work on it. But
Mhm.
even that is sometimes, if you don't come to it yourself, if it's not on your own journey, then it's not the same. It'll be a piece that maybe I love, but then they're not in the place to understand it at that moment.
Mhm. For sure. Yeah. Okay, I have a question here from Hope about technique, which we'll pivot to in a moment. But Chaz is also asking about repertoire, which we're talking about here. So, also Mark Wilson says, "Hello, just getting in after teaching. Love coming into this convo. That's great. Mark's going to be on next week,
Mark.
so stick around for next Saturday with Mark Wilson."
Yes.
Chaz is saying, "Do you think learning pieces that are overplayed are worth learning to be able to understand technical and musical abilities, or is it more applicable to play what you want?"
Yeah, I play through like Villalobos etudes and preludes all the time. I love kind of reading them and then slowly over time getting better at them. But I really don't perform them because I don't know if, yeah, I just don't want to.
Yeah.
It's just not what I want to play. And there's a lot of benefit in learning everything from Villalobos because he's such an important historical figure in our history as guitarists. And what you see composers doing after that is sometimes based off of Villalobos. So you have to know Villalobos.
Yeah.
And so there's absolutely benefit in just learning it and studying it and understanding it. But there's not sometimes like just always producing it and trying to make it perfect is not necessary.
Yeah.
Like we only have so much time in the world with our bodies. So
Yeah, right. Also, like I just feel like it's sort of I mean I understand that not wanting to do what's overplayed, and that's kind of tied to what I was saying before, where people just like copy each other and do that. But at the same time, like I think the main metric to worry about is like what do you want to play? Like you were saying,
yeah,
like it's
exactly. Yeah.
I think that when a player plays a program of all Villalobos and Bach, if they really want to play that and they really love it and they've really dove into it, dived into it, because they love it, then it's going to show, like when they play it.
Yeah.
And that, but at the same time, yeah.
And oftentimes those are frequently played because they are masterpieces, because they
Yeah.
are, yeah. And it's a very different thing I think if you're talking about competitions or a concert too, because I don't think we really need to go into that, but basically competitions, there's a whole bunch of weird strategy that's involved, which has nothing to do with performance or concerts whatsoever,
Mm-hmm.
which is another downside. But if you're good at the strategy of it, then that's a different thing, and that includes choosing repertoire that makes sense for the setting.
For sure. Hope is saying, ask Javier about left hand technique. Well, you've just asked him, Hope. What do you think about left hand technique, Javier?
Left hand technique, yeah. I've gone through all sorts of. I mean, when I was a teenager, I think I was reading through like Pumping Nylon, and my teacher was always telling me to like be more directly on top of my fingers.
Parallel
And
yeah.
and when I got to Paris, like sometimes at Paris Conservatory, I had teachers who were telling me to do all sorts of stuff with my hands. And I think I just came to the realization that with every single technique that you use, there is always a strength, but with every strength, there comes a weakness.
Mm-hmm.
And nothing is applicable to all situations.
Yeah.
And your left hand, I consider my left hand as kind of malleable, and it has a mind of its own to a certain extent. I let it do what it wants, and I try not to think about it too much. One thing that I've noticed over time is that I play more on the flats of my fingers, more and more. partly to avoid noise from the bass strings, but also just because I find it more comfortable and more accurate if I play with the flatter part of my finger, because there's not so much risk in just getting exactly the right spot, or if you touch the nail or something like that. So I've noticed that, but I really try to go through pieces and find fingerings that make sense for my technique, and then let my hand have a mind of its own and work it out. And not just your hand, but your arm. I think that this is like a really underutilized thing, is our shoulder and our arm, and how it's able to move to allow different positions. Already, if you have, 1 and 4 and you switch it to the opposite way where you have the 4 on the bass string, that's easily done by a shift in the arm. But if you did it with your fingers, you're using these tiny muscles that it feels tense. So yeah, I think that'd be the basics of my left hand technique.
Yeah, amen. I mean, I really try to emphasize with my students this idea of like a spectrum of positions, for the left hand, which is, in line with what you're saying, like that we have all these ways of using our hands available to us, and probably every way is going to be the most useful in any given circumstance. What needs to happen is you need to find what that way is in every circumstance, and it might be totally just like naturally happening the more music you play, probably that.
Yeah.
So it's hard though to balance like being analytical with like being sort of intuitive, and and of course I also find myself very often like trying to get a student to do a very specific thing, like play very curled on the tips of the fingers, and then I always find myself giving a caveat of like, but this probably is like really unuseful, like not useful in this other situation, just so that people don't feel like there's like one way to do it and it only works that way. And
no, and that was my mind as a student too, is like, my teacher tells me to play like that, I should probably play like that all the time.
Right.
But that's where that kind of dogma sets in, and
it doesn't work. Yeah. And you'll find yourself just like compromising things when your body is telling you something else, and if you listen to your body, you'd probably play better, so
yeah, I think that's a big part of it too. It's just understanding yourself, and that's why I think I love music too, and being a instrumentalist is that I kind of understand myself through it better, and I learn about myself. And even if I kind of go on that journey, and it's really just about learning about myself, because if I'm dealing with something and it's really stressed out, and I have to think about why it's stressed out, and sometimes it's just because of something in my life, and I should just take a break.
For sure. Thatcher Harrison has left a very long comment here. You might want to go read it later, Javier, because there's a lot of he really appreciates a lot of what you've done, as I think we all do. But his question in there is, I have noticed, correct me if I'm wrong, and I think I have a guess for the answer to this question, then you can tell me if I'm right, okay? He says, you play the Bogdanovich Sonata significantly slower on the Naxos album than you did, for example, at the final rounds of Boston and GFA. If you don't mind me asking, which interpretation is more indicative of what you intend for the piece? Did you play the piece slower than usual because you were trying to play a clean take for an album, or to keep the polyrhythms from getting muddled inside the church? Can I guess?
Funny. Yeah, you can guess.
My guess is because you were recording in wintry Toronto and it was cold.
I was about to say, that's actually the most hilarious thing, is that every Naxos CD which is recorded there, as per Norbert Kraft's desired location, it's an amazing church, but they turn off the heating and it's in the middle of winter. And every like single GFA winter CD from there is under tempo, if you notice from there, usually. And I even had my teachers like warn me about that, is that it's going to be under tempo. But the Bogdanovich Sonata, I ran into other issues while recording it, because I realized that piece works so much better live, and I just wanted to record it because there's not a recording of it. But I felt like the producer was getting really meticulous about every little thing, if it was perfect or not. And then the Bogdanovich Sonata on that CD was the one piece that I was the least happy with, because I feel like it had the most edits, the most cuts, and it became more of like a Frankenstein, interpretation. And that's the issue with recording versus performing, is that if you have a piece like the Bogdanovich Sonata, you're performing, you're reacting to it in real time, and it's living and it's breathing. But to be a good recorder, sometimes you have to have a rather plastic image of the piece in your head, an interpretive element that I want to play it just like this, and no matter how many edits I take, it's going to be like that. But that's not how I function. I usually am like, it's got to depend on the room, and it's got to depend, which goes back to the church thing. But you know, and that's something I think I'm still struggling with recordings all the time, is just
Hmm.
getting dealing with
It's hard. I mean,
yeah.
I've recently started doing, like, I've been recording myself for a while, but getting these new mics and stuff and starting this new channel that I started with my friend Steven Tolman, doing videos for that. I've been getting more into like recording audio first, editing everything, and then playing along, you know, like lip syncing or
Hmm.
whatever, because that's what a lot of people do with videos now.
Yeah.
And it's just very different. I don't want to say it's bad or good, but like it's a very different headspace to be like meticulously editing everything and then playing along to this ideal version later. And I feel like it's just a totally different creative process. And that's why I feel like recording should be treated as a whole extra creative step, you know. And like when
Yeah.
people start recording, whether they record themselves or record with someone else, they should think of it in the sense of like there's composer, there's performer, and then there's like the producer. And if you're the producer, you're like stepping into a new role. Like you're not the player anymore. You're also
Yeah.
like this other
Yeah.
creative entity, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
You know, this is why the enigma for me is Glenn Gould, and how
right. Yeah.
he just he would sometimes brag about making like whatever hundreds of cuts in a Bach fugue. and
Hmm. Yeah.
but that was his mentality towards it. He wanted that, and he was great at it. His
Yeah.
recordings are freaking amazing. And
Hmm.
but he wrote like an elegy for the concert stage, and he said goodbye, and he really hated performing.
Yeah.
And that is a reflection of how he saw music and his music. And
Yeah.
there's a funny story with like you know, Svatoslav Richter, who's on the
Yeah.
Russian pianist, who's on the lived the same time period, and was the opposite. He hated, called it like the hot box where music goes to die. That studio,
Yeah.
you know. And he only did one studio album, and the rest were, he refused after that, and the rest of his recordings are live,
Yeah.
which is amazing. But he Gould, at a certain point, he fell in love with Richter's playing, and he wanted to get Richter to produce an album for Richter. So he wanted to get Richter sent to Toronto and that they record an album together. And when Richter heard that, he said, "Okay, I'll agree, but only if Glenn Gould comes to do a concert at my festival in France."
That's good. Oh
So, you
man.
know, knowing that it would never, he was
Yeah, yeah.
already off the stage at that
That's
point.
funny. Oh man. Yeah. Yeah, I mean I feel that I really enjoy recording, but I enjoy it for different reasons than I enjoy performing. And I think I've learned to enjoy it more when I'm the one in the editing chair, you know. Like now
Yeah.
that I have the capability to edit myself, I feel a lot more enjoyment out of it because I'm not sort of relying on someone else to be meticulous on my behalf, you
Yeah.
know.
And you understand your tools. You kind of, on the computer, you know where
Yeah.
everything is. You can,
Yeah, it's hard to put that in someone else's hands. You know, it is.
yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I never thought about that. How translating something that you've performed so often from the stage to the recording studio would produce such a difference. But I can see that with the piece, especially a piece you used in the final round of a lot of competitions, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, even Gould says that about I think like the Fifth French Suite. I think that's what it was. He toured extensively with,
hmm,
and then when he finally left the concert stage, he said that he had a really hard time recording it, and he felt like it was because he had this live interpretation of it, and he just couldn't get into that recording headspace with that piece.
for sure. Yeah. Well, thank you, Thatcher, for the question because it was helped us go down an insightful rabbit hole. And there's a question here from Chaz and another comment from Mark. I'm going to get to them in a moment, but I want to put you in the hot seat, Javier, and do this listening test.
Okay.
So I'm going to share my audio with you. And for people listening, you can also guess along, but Javier, you're not allowed to look at the chat right now. So
Okay, I'm
yeah.
not looking. I'm not
No,
looking.
you're not watching the chat. Okay. We're going to play a little game that I do here where I play a recording and then the guest has to try to guess the piece, the composer, and or the player. So there's like possible 3 points. And I'll be very generous and give a lot of hints.
Is there like a high score or something that's held by somebody?
I think someone out of 21, I think someone got like 19 ones. I'll have to check. I have the score in the back catalog. So I'll publish like a leaderboard like later at the end of the year or something, you know. So and there'll be like a prize. I don't know what it'll be. Something probably not worth much, but okay. We're gonna start with some stuff that I think is on the easier end, and then we'll move on to something more a little more difficult later. So here's the first one.
Granado's
Not
live
Granados.
recording. Oh, it's not recorded. Albanese. Yeah.
It's not Albanese.
Let's get
Wait,
those
I'll
two
play the
mixed up.
beginning. I'll play the beginning. This
Not
one,
Albanese.
not Albanese. You get a few
Okay.
guesses. Don't
I've
worry.
already failed.
No, it's okay. You get several guesses.
Okay.
Maybe this one is not as
I
easy.
know
as
the
thought.
piece.
Yeah, you know the piece,
Yeah.
of course.
It's a Spanish composer. If I just name
Yes.
Spanish composers, you can tell me.
It is.
Toroba, Torina.
No, not quite. It's Joaquin
No,
Malat.
really?
It's Joaquin Malatz.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. Okay, I have no idea about that composer.
Yeah. It's okay. And the you know the piece, the name?
Is it like a Spanish dance?
It is
Yes.
Serenata Española. So I'll give you half a point for getting Spanish in the.
Yeah,
in the
that's
name.
right. Yeah,
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
had some students.
Yeah, and the player, I'll give you a hint, is an American guitarist who is heavily involved with the GFA.
Martha.
Yes, it's Martha. Yes. Okay, so you get 1.5 out of 3. Not bad. Not bad. A bunch of people in the chat did get it too. Hope is saying, didn't Renee get like more than it was possible by guessing guitars? I think that's true. I think Renee may have gotten over the possible point limit because he guessed what guitars they were playing too. But
Wow.
yeah, but Renee is
Impressive. Yeah.
yeah, very good ear, obviously. And no, Jose, it was not Bream, it was Martha Masters. This doesn't sound like a Bream recording at all, I don't think. Anyhow, okay, next one. This one should be a little more of a giveaway.
Okay, this is Anna Vidovic playing the Walton Bagatelles.
Not Anna Vidovic, but it is the Walton Bagatelles. Which Bagatel is it?
That's fifth, right?
Fifth, yes, correct.
Yeah.
This is
Wait, let me guess. Let me guess again.
okay. You want to hear a little more?
No, I can
Okay.
tell just by the attack. Mingsu.
Mengsu, yes, very good. Wow, good one, Javier. That was good. Didn't even have to give you a hint on the players. 3 out of 3. Yeah, super even attack. Yes, Leo. Everyone in the chat got this. Oh, Ricardo says Walton Bagatelle 1. Ricardo, you gotta brush up on your Walton knowledge here. Okay, next one.
Ooh. Wait, keep playing. I guess the guitarist.
Yeah. I love the like clipping on this
Ooh, that
recording.
vibrato. Okay,
Yeah.
that's got to be like that's Prelude 1 by Ida Presti
It's
or
Villabush.
Lagoya.
Oh, but yeah,
No,
but
the player.
who's playing?
Yeah, sorry.
Ida Presti, not Lagoya and not Presti, but you're sort of the right general.
Sounds French. Yeah.
It's not
Maybe
a French,
country.
not a French guitarist. A Spanish guitarist,
Mm.
not Segovia.
Crazy vibrato on that. Yeah.
Yeah,
No, it's
Um,
too. It sounds too late of a recording to be Yobet.
this player might look a little bit like a turtle, in my opinion.
Oh, like a turtle.
Yes, I'm sorry, but that's what I always think of when I see him.
Ah. That must be someone I don't know. I give up. What
I
is
hope it's Narciso Yepes or Yepe.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
No, I
But
didn't even
still,
know he played that much like 6-string.
Well, it's on Spotify. I don't know. Yeah, I think there's quite a few 6-string recordings before he became kind of known for the 10-string. I don't know. Okay, next one. I think this shouldn't be hard for you, given what you like to play.
Trying to guess the guitarist. Okay, so it's Ponce Sonata Meridional.
No, not
Um,
this is not a Meridional.
Ah, okay.
Do you want to hear a bit more?
Yeah, a little bit more.
I'll play a later section near to the end. This piece does sound like Meridional though, but it's not.
Yeah, it kind of does.
It has some of the same little runs in there for sure.
I'm trying to think of what it is, but it's that maybe one of those Mexican pieces.
No, it's
No.
Well, I'll let you guess one more time for the piece.
Is it a sonata? He
No,
has
it's
that.
not. It's not a sonata.
Ah. Ah. What are the pieces that we have that's not?
It's one where there are like several versions of it. There's like a manuscript version that some people started recording recently, and then there's like
But I think it's always the case for Ponce.
yeah, I suppose. But this one in particular, there's an Axis
complicated.
CD recently from a guitarist who you know quite well who did both versions on the same CD.
Oh, it's Judicao. Yeah.
It's not Judical
So it
playing
must-
it, but the piece. I'm just giving you clues for the piece. It's not Judical.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Um.
Because Judical
Oh,
recorded this piece.
it must be the theme finale.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
'Cause
like the
Judical
finale from it.
Yeah. This is the finale. Yeah.
Okay. Now, who's the player?
The player is a German guitarist and composer.
Tilman Hauptstock.
Tilman Hauptstock. Very good. Okay, 3 out of 3. Not bad. A lot of people were guessing Judical Perwa. Sorry, everybody. I was disappointing you. Matilda says Yeppe does look like a turtle. There you go. I'm now justified in that. Okay, next one. Okay, I think that should be enough to guess the piece.
Okay, so that's what is that? Soar?
Not quite. I believe.
Oh, Aguado. Yeah.
Yes, Aguado. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. You're picking stuff that I don't play that much. It's great.
Sorry. Sorry.
Aguado, and
You're
it
still
must
doing
be. It sounds like maybe Pavel Steido.
It's not Pavel Steidl. It's an Italian guitarist.
Still on a romantic guitar.
Leo and Ben
Like a
both
Stouffer.
have it. Ben Lougheed has it too. Yeah, romantic guitar. Yeah, not David Starobin. Ben, good guess though, but it's not David Starobin. It's an Italian guitarist.
Okay, I give up.
This Italian guitarist is very famous for being in a duo, a very good duo.
Oh, it's Lorenzo.
Lorenzo Michele. Oh, so Leo got it right before I said it. Nice one, Leo. And the piece.
The piece is one of those introduction and rondos, right?
Yes, it's a rondo.
Introduction
Very good.
from the introduction and rondo.
That's good enough. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. 3 out of
I don't know
3.
which number.
I need to stop giving you hints. You've only missed
A
like-
minor.
A minor. Exactly. You got it. There, yeah. Very good. Okay. Next one.
Oh, I know this. This is Judicao and Jeremy playing Rodrigo Tonadilla.
Yes. Very good. Guess I couldn't get away with putting them on here and you not guessing it.
No, I really liked that album when I was a teenager. Where I started
nice.
Judicao. Yeah.
I listened to that
bopping.
album a lot too. Actually, it's a good one. I love the Tonadilla. I played it with my friend in Vancouver, Joel Thompson, but we only ever played the first and second movement, sadly.
Yeah, that's a crazy sound they get on those two Smallmans together.
Yeah, it's nuts.
Yeah.
Yeah. Suits the piece. Okay. Here, I'll play a later part, or I guess this is the part I should let you hear.
Okay, I have no idea the guitarist, but it's the Mazurka from Barrios' Mazurka.
Ah, there you go, Mazurka Passionata. Yeah, a bunch of people in the chat got it too. Steve Cowan says, Javier is my fave. I'll have to come back to this later and unfortunately have fun. Okay, see you later, Steve. Pop back in at a later time. Okay, yes, and the player is a French guitarist.
Thibaut?
Not Thibaut. But this player did win the GFA.
Raphael?
Raphael! Very good. Okay, I'm giving you too many hints. I'm too nice. Okay, this one should be interesting. Oh, a bunch of other people got Raphael too. There. Nice. Here we go. I know, right? It's like a kick in the face, you know.
I have no clue. What is that music?
It's ridiculous. When you know who the player is, you will understand why it sounds like this.
I can play a later section. Maybe that will help.
Yeah, play a later section. Okay, I'm gonna say Fisk.
It's not Fisk. Good guess though, but it's not Fisk.
It's not one of his students.
As far as I know, no. I don't. No, definitely not. Well, I don't know about definitely.
Trying to
But
think of somebody in that vein.
oh, Gabriele.
Tedesco. Right?
Yes, Tedesco. Gabriele and Messi has the player and the piece and the
Ooh.
Very good, Gabriele.
Okay, all I can guess is Tedesco.
Okay, it's Tedesco. It's a player from Asia, if that helps.
Oh,
I don't want to get too specific, or you'll just guess it.
Yamashita.
Yamashita, very good. Yes.
Yeah, that's
And
right.
can you guess what at least the set of pieces? This
And it
is
must
from?
be one of the Capricios. Yeah.
Yes, it's one of the capricios.
Goya.
I'll give you half a point for that because that's you can't. I guess you can't guess which capriccio.
That's
it is.
crazy. That sound is wow.
Yeah. I was waiting for you to hear that one because I knew it would just like wake you up, Yes, nuts. Okay, last one. This one's a doozy, so we'll see if you get it. Any idea?
It's the same chord going up and down the neck of the guitar. Is that what it is?
Okay, I'll play like a
Talk about Villalobos inspired. I mean, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a little. Gabrielle is guessing Bach. I think that he's trolling. It's an English composer.
Yeah. Okay. English composer. Play a little bit more of it.
Okay.
For me, if you would. No, I have no idea.
Hope says I listened to that recording to wake up in the morning. Oh my god, that was terrifying as an alarm. Leo Sales says Barkley. It's close, but it's not Barkley. I think this is a piece that was forgotten for a long time and then sort of discovered later.
Is it a B name?
B name? No,
Yeah,
it's not.
no,
No,
B
it's not a
name.
B name. It's a last name starts with S. Chaz is guessing Britain. No, not Dodgson. Mark, good guess, but no. It's Cyril Scott.
Oh, I never heard of him.
Oh, okay. This is a piece that was like I think it might be a Bremer or Segovia piece that never got played, and then was sort of more recently unearthed. Steve Cowan has a really good recording.
Likely Bream. Yeah.
Yeah, but there's a really good recording by Steve, and then this is one by Michael Kolk. So, yeah.
Okay.
It's a very cool piece.
Very cool. Yeah, I have to check that out.
And it has a beautiful first and second movement. It's sort of impressionistic. I think it was written in like the 30s or 40s. So it's kind of got a... Because then it wouldn't be a Bream one. Maybe it was written later. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. But it's a very cool piece. Okay, so Javier, are you ready for the moment of truth?
Mm-hmm.
In the beginner category, you got 6.5 out of 9.
Okay.
Not bad.
Beginner category.
Yeah, beginner.
So we're going on to intermediate.
Intermediate, you got 9 out of 9. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
We already did the other categories then.
Yeah. Yeah, we're not doing more. So that was it. And then the advanced, you got 5.5 out of 9. So you did pretty good.
I am an intermediate.
Yes, you're an intermediate guy. Yeah. Oh man. Nice. Now there are some questions I should go back to because I promised I would, and now I have to scroll through all these guesses for the game. Chaz was asking, I would love to hear more about the strategy of competitions, and they said I will try to limit my comments. Don't worry about it. Just ask as many questions as you want. This is what we're here for. So, what would you advise for the strategy of competing?
Yeah, just really be smart about your repertoire. Don't repeat things in different rounds unless the jury is different. I mean, I really hate talking about this stuff for a reason because it's so unmusical, honestly.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
it's stuff that's a little bit, it's like it's dirty. But
Mm.
yeah, look at who the jury is. Look at who the past winners are. See, I usually wouldn't even enter a competition if I didn't think it was up my alley because
Yeah.
like I remember I looked at doing Targa, the Beni Kassim competition, and I just thought that based on the winners and the repertoire that people were playing, that I probably was going to have a great shot. And but I also saw like Tokyo competition as a really good opportunity because it was more like they like early music and they clearly like modern music. You know, it's almost like to win that competition you have to play a big contemporary piece,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like they always choose somebody who plays a big contemporary piece, so that's kind of telling. And you know, there's just certain things like that, but especially the most important thing is repertoire. It really is. And I think we all get stuck in the idea, in those ideas we talked about of just playing what's in fashion or what's worked before. But when it comes down to it, that'll take you like to the semifinal or the final. But when you get this old jury members who've seen it all, they oftentimes are looking for somebody who they'd go back to see in concert or somebody who they
Mm-hmm.
want to see more of. And to do that, it takes your own voice and it takes doing some research on repertoire that you think needs support sometimes. And
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes those kind of people, those old jury members, they really want to see that. They want to see an invigoration of the repertoire, not just great players.
Yeah, I remember you mentioning when you were interviewed about the GFA that you chose the Ross Thorne elegy partially because you knew that it would be, it's kind of a forgotten gem, and you knew that that would be popular with sort of, you know, an older generation of jury members who might
Yeah, yeah, and
recognize.
and honestly, I had several jury members who were like, "Wow, you played that? Like I totally forgot about that piece." And yeah, everybody used to play that in the '80s, and you know,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, I mean, it's thinking pragmatically, right? I mean, I agree with you that, I mean, I haven't had a ton of success in competitions, and I honestly haven't done a ton of them because they're so exhausting. But,
mm-hmm.
um, you know, I do feel like the times I have had success, I've looked back on it and been like, oh, the people on that jury naturally gravitate towards the kind of music I play and the way I play, you know, and so it's kind of, yeah, and that was sort of by accident the few times I did well, but it's probably a good point. And also think about, like, you know, where what you're, if you're going to be heard or not. I remember Marchandila was saying that a competition, you should treat it like a stage, in a place to win some fans, whether you win the prize or not, right? And so trying to play strategically in places where you know you're going to be heard, especially when there's open rounds and stuff, and you're going to be heard by others who might love your playing and then hire you later for a concert, even if you don't win a prize. And
Yeah,
that's certainly a good idea to consider too. Is like
absolutely.
how much will you actually get heard by people who want to hear you play, not just judge your playing. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
I
Anyhow.
completely agree with that. Yeah.
Um, okay, and Chaz says it's super dirty. Lockbaum refuses to talk to me about this stuff. Okay, yes. I can see how Steven might be a little burnt out on doing competitions. Um, Hope says give us the pro strats. Oh no. Full name of the piece real quick. Oh, Chaz is asking about, okay, the last piece I played was Sonatina by Cyril Scott. Sonatina for guitar. Just look up Steve Cowan or Michael Kolk or Steve Cowan on Spotify, and you'll find this piece on CDs of both of theirs. Sebastian Robles says, "Hey guys, great to see you. What is your relationship to Solfege?" Sebastian, I miss that guy. He's a good guy. It seems very helpful for teaching, but I'm wondering what impact it has had, if any, on your playing. Solfege. Do you have a relationship to Solfege, Javier?
Yeah, I do have a strong relationship to solfege. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm not the best solfeger. I mean, for me as an American and 18 moving to France, it was like total bucket of cold water on me. And they put me in a class with like 13 and 14-year-olds because my ear training was so bad and I really couldn't tell intervals. And um, yeah, and that became my kind of my language for it. My language of music theory was sort of on that French side. And um, I think that fixed do for me is helps because when I think of the name of the note, if I think of the pitch itself, I can sing the lines if I need to, and every single note has a different sound. So either if I'm singing do re mi fa sol la si do, then I know that I'm really saying all of those notes because I'm speaking the syllable. Whereas if I just da 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 da, it's kind of like I'm just doing a scale.
Mm-hmm.
So there's more clarity that comes from it, but there's also for me, I really see that as where the guitar is. If I where my notes are, and
Mm.
I don't have I don't have perfect pitch or even very good at like relative pitch, but I think that solfege, I mean, for teaching, it can be good to sing, but I don't know if that's as necessary. I think that it's more important for just having a way to actually sing your phrases with syllables as if you were halfway between speaking and singing.
Yeah. I guess my relationship with solfege is a lot less deep than yours in the sense that I haven't really done fixed do. I've always done movable do just within the key. But for me, it's about singing, which I guess is kind of a separate thing. But I agree 100% that singing is such a big part of how I practice and also how I find effective ways to improve phrasing. And I try to get my students to sing as much as possible, even if they're not doing solfege, just because I feel like singing a melody and speaking rhythm and all that helps me embody things so much better. And once it's in my body in that way, it translates so much better to the guitar.
Yeah, that's what percussion. Like I have a good friend who's a decent percussionist, and he's like, if you that's what teachers make their students do. If you, oftentimes percussionists will go too fast, and then you can't hear anything. And if you can't say it, then you shouldn't play it that fast. Like if you can verbalize it in that actual speed, then you can play it at that actual speed. But there's also an issue with I see a lot of younger players too, sometimes with competitions, just playing so fast that you can't hear the notes. And that's when it's too fast. It's like they can't hear the notes, you can't hear the notes. It's just a blur.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And I just think, if you can't speak it, the rhythm isn't going to be really clear. And also, at least for me, because so much of what we do, and I tell my students this all the time, so much of what we do on the instrument is mimicking a human voice. Like the way that we do phrasing, the way that you have to breathe, all of this stuff is based on the fact that music for humans comes from the voice. Like that's the primal starting point of like music is singing a melody, different timbres, different colors of the voice. And so when we play like a melody really beautifully on the guitar, we're essentially trying to make it sound like a voice as much as possible, right? And so
that's a great point, because breathing. I mean, if you have to breathe and actually sing solfege, then you physically breathe.
Yeah.
And in terms of breathing, it's like even on guitar, on an exhale, we have much more control over our upper bodies than on an inhale. Yeah. And taking a breath before a phrase and then smoothly exhaling through it, you'll have far more control than if you're like I see many people do.
100%. Yeah. I just think there's no quicker way to develop good phrasing than verbalizing and singing and breathing and all those things that have to do with our like respiratory and vocal system. We should probably play some more music because we've talked and answered a lot of questions here. Let's do some Takamitsu because you have two options here. I was really happy to see that in the Woods video that you quoted from the Confronting Silence book. I have this book as well, and it's just a beautiful collection of writings of Takamitsu's. Unfortunately, I lent it to someone, and I'm not sure who I lent it to. So if someone's watching and you have my Takamitsu book, please let me know, because I forgot who I gave it to, and now I'm like, I went looking for it today and couldn't find it. So
good book, yeah.
What's the passage you read from here? Where is it from in the book? Do you remember?
So this, I think this was a bit particular because in the Woods, I recorded like a month ago for a church in San Francisco, the Swedenborgian Church. And I was partly trying to, they were doing a festival of nature and the arts. And in San Francisco, Muir Woods is just north there in Marin County. And they, so it's Takamitsu is really his last piece. And I was trying to explain in what relation Takamitsu sees his music as a natural thing and as relating to nature. And that's essentially why the piece was recorded there, because they were doing a whole feature on John Muir, and so I was playing Muir Woods.
Nice.
So,
Yeah. We'll listen to the first one is Muir Woods, right?
I can't remember what the exact quote was though. I don't.
Okay. Well, you read it in the video, so people will hear
The,
it
the
anyways.
first the first
Yeah.
movement is Wainscot Pond.
Wainscot Pond. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we'll just
Last
listen.
movement is Muir Woods.
Okay, we'll just listen to the first movement. People can find the video at a later date somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be on YouTube later, but it's on video for now.
It's a premiere for the Messy Desk. Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yes.
Yes. Let's listen to that here.
I'd like to read just a quote from one of Takamitsu's essays on confronting silence. So here he says, "I wish to free sounds from the trite rules of music, rules that are in turn stifled by formulas and calculations. I want to give sounds the freedom to breathe. Rather than on ideology of self-expression, music should be based on a profound relationship to nature, sometimes gentle, sometimes harsh. When sounds are possessed by ideas instead of having their own identity, music suffers."
Okay, wonderful. Sorry, I cut people off during the second movement. They can watch it later on YouTube when it comes out.
Yes, yes.
Nice, beautiful. I love Takamitsu. I've never actually played any, shamefully. I've started reading through Equinox just because it's so awesome, but
Yeah,
I really
it
should
is
play
awesome.
some because I love his music and I loved reading that book, but haven't had a chance yet.
It's an incredibly important composer. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah, and that piece in the woods is like, the more I look at it, the more things I find. It's almost it's as if it's a Beethoven sonata. It's like everything is cut from the same cloth. It's all
Mm-hmm.
the same material, inverted, transformed, and yeah, it's nuts. It's really well composed.
Awesome. Yeah. Leo says just have to go. Gonna pop in later or rewatch. Thanks, Leo. Thanks for joining us. Just trying to see if I missed anybody here. Hope says let's have some tech talk, guitars, nails, strings, all that. I think we already kind of talked about guitars and nails. I don't. Talking about nails is a little exhausting.
Yeah.
We do that enough. For strings, I mean, you just said you'd like to choose the strings based on the guitar, right? So,
Yeah, pretty much.
yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And your own
And you know
playing.
your personal preferences, and also your nail shape and what works best for you, kind of thing.
Definitely, yeah. And Nacho Eguia says, I'm watching you from Argentina. Thank you for joining us. That's wonderful. Chaz says Equinox is so much fun. I love the tuning in Equinox. I mean, that's kind of why I started playing it a little bit too, just to read through it, because it's very similar to this piece I play called Shadow Prism, which has sort of a similar tuning, and I just love that that tuning. It's so, like, you can just noodle and make amazing things with it. You know?
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's crazy. Great. Javier, I'm wondering where you think you want the guitar to go from here. What would you like as the future for our instrument? How do you think we should move forward?
What a question.
I know. It's like, yeah. It's no pressure.
Yeah. I think with that, I would honestly, I think we have a lot of guitar players, and I think we have teachers. I would like to see it supported more. And I would like to see us getting more recognition from other areas of the arts, and getting more people from other areas of the arts to become audience members is really what I'd like to do. I also think we need to, I mean, what I think about a lot is developing the amateur field.
Yes.
Because I think that amateur enthusiasts are really our best bet on this artistic economy, because you really, if you have amateurs who have made their money elsewhere and can bring it into the guitar scene, that is incredibly valuable. They're the ones that go to concerts, who buy CDs, who love it.
Yeah.
And they're not always the, you know, and I've had amateur students where they can barely play anything, but their love for music is so clear, and it's inspiring to me to see it. And I think that needs to be valued above all else.
I agree with you 100%, and I think, you know, it's sort of unfortunate to me when we get a little bit pretentious within the guitar world and sort of gatekeep a little bit towards amateurs, because it's also like a lot of amateur players. I mean, honestly, our instrument is, and our repertoire is kind of nerdy in the sense that, like, it's this very weird niche rabbit hole that has all this depth, so much depth. But that's why the best people to sort of market towards, to use kind of a dirty term, is people who are really interested in that depth, right? I mean, like,
yeah.
I think it's not a coincidence that me and a lot of other classical guitarists, when we listen to music with electric guitar, we're listening to like prog metal or prog rock, you know, like it's the same kind of thing actually. And I think that you see the same phenomenon in those genres, where like a lot of the sort of fans of the artists are like also enthusiasts themselves, who like buy gear and, you know, home record, even if they have a different day job and all that kind of thing. Like that's, it's the same sort of audience, you know? So, you know, it's just, that's really important. But yeah,
I
mean,
the complexity of progressive rock sometimes, and all of its genres that has spun off from rock at this point is kind of similar. Like they just seem like they're closed until you find them, and you're like, whoa,
yeah,
what the hell is math rock? And,
yeah, I mean, it's also it's just a lot of those, you know, bands make their money. If you look at prog metal, a lot of the prog metal bands I know make most of their money from like selling gear, because their fans are all like guitar nerds, you know, who like buy pedals and guitars and
like sponsorships and things.
Yeah, because there's like not enough money in like the music, because it's sort of, you know, complex metal. Like not a lot of people listen to that, but the people who do will buy the signature guitar, you know. with their day job money.
Yeah, they're just crazy
Um,
about it. Yeah.
yeah, and we kind of have the same thing a little bit. I also think it's interesting that you bring up like cross pollination with other art forms. I think it sounds to me like you're advocating for like a Julian Bream kind of way of doing things, right? Because he was a big, I mean, he was so active in working with other instruments and working with composers and trying to be in like sort of other artistic circles outside of just classical guitar, right? Um,
Mhm.
and I think
Yeah,
that
and
is.
I think
Sorry, go ahead.
yeah. Well, it's just that yeah, that's kind of it. I mean, I think Julian Bream and John Williams as well, they're playing in jazz clubs and in
Mm-hmm.
venues that were different than what Segovia was trying to play in. And
Yeah.
I think yeah, it's the advantage of our instrument too is that does have popular roots, and it's always been kind of the poor man's instrument, and it's always been the case that it's more accessible. And for some people, it's the way into classical music in general. For some people, it's the way into just something deeper. I mean, I I think that it is absolutely like if playing in different locations and is something I want to explore more, but it's possible right
Mm-hmm.
now.
Yeah, I agree, and it's that's another reason that the sort of like festival circuit and thing is kind of a double-edged sword, because it's great
Mhm.
to have this. I love the fact that the guitar world is so interconnected. You know, I wouldn't have it any other way. This show itself is an example of like guitarists speaking to guitarists and sort of meeting each other online, and it's amazing that we can keep that up during the pandemic and everything. And you know, organizations like the GFA are part of that too. But at the same time, I think it's also our responsibility, each of us, to start looking also outside and finding ways to work with, I mean, other instruments as a starting point. You know, chamber music and working with composers who haven't written for guitar before. That's an important starting point. But for sure,
Teach them how to write for a guitar, at least at the very beginning. Like you
yeah.
can give them the scales, maybe they'll.
Well, actually, that was my whole master's research project in Maastricht. I did the 2-year research project on how non-guitar composers and guitarists collaborate, and it was a very interesting thing to research. Um, but yeah, I mean, people are
There's
eager.
a lot on Bream that way.
Yeah,
A lot on
for
probably
sure.
Bream, Fisk, all sorts of. Yeah.
There's a lot of young players doing it now too, though, and there's a lot of good models out there actually, and ways that it can be really beneficial for both parties. I think that composers are quite eager to write for instruments they haven't written for before. They just kind of need someone to make a relationship with, who's going to like help them realize their ideas, you know. And it's not as scary as people might think it is, and it actually teaches you so much about the instrument that you wouldn't have learned in any other way. But yeah, but also other art forms, right? I mean, like my favorite gigs are the ones I've played in non-traditional venues. When I did a tour of Ontario a few years ago with my friend Nathan Bredesen, because we have a duo playing all contemporary music, and we played in this like little art gallery in this little town, and it was like so amazing. It was like the best show, one of the best shows on the tour, because it was just like this little room with like 20 people. I mean, the fee was okay because they, you know, it was people really dedicated to the series and they had support financially, but playing in these like this room of sculptures and like this little venue, and you know, it wasn't a guitar organization, but it was kind of really fun to get outside of that world a
Yeah,
little bit.
probably they just loved it too. Whereas sometimes if you have a guitar audience, they're kind of like, how do you do that? And you use this technique for this thing, and it's like not about the music anymore. It's just about the guitar.
Yeah, for sure. And that's the real red pill too, is that non-guitar audiences are way less judgmental about how you play and way more enthusiastic about just hearing it, you know.
Yeah.
You're not being compared to a bunch of other guitarists. You're just there appreciating the art form for what it is. Anyhow.
Yeah.
Jacob Johnson is saying, "Hey guys, love Javier's stuff. What are some musicians, particularly non-guitarists, that you would recommend guitar players to listen to?" What do you think, Javier?
Awesome. I got some of those. I think that one of like the greatest current musicians, who's incredibly active, is Jordi Savall. And I think all of his bands, Le Concert des Nations, whatever the other ones, the Styrian 21, they're incredible. I mean, last year they did a Beethoven symphony album of the first 5 symphonies, which is just unbelievable. I mean, it totally changed the way I thought of those symphonies. Yeah, because it's all on period instruments, and it's trying to get to Beethoven's actual tempos. And I was, just totally floored by that kind of thing. And he's also just got early music in the sense of discovering traditional music from different parts of the world and how they intersect. And he releases like 5 albums a year of this stuff, and they're all amazing.
Yeah, he's amazing.
Yeah, and I don't know. There's plenty of others, but the music world in general is
Vast. Yeah.
yeah, just so vast. And I think just as important as knowing interpreters and players, like Jordi Savall, I think he's a little bit unique because he does so many different things. But and even just finding a composer, I think, whether or not they wrote for guitar and just loving them for their music. And then through that composer, finding interpreters that you love, and through those interpreters, finding other composers that you love. And as such, you just have to become sort of a listener and enthusiastic about it. And I think more and more for me, I am really interested in, I mean, contemporary music, of course, but also early music and the new stuff that's happening there in terms of period instruments, and how that's just completely a new phenomenon that makes us rethink musical history. And if you hear, it's like, if you hear some of that stuff on the instruments that they were written for, or just something closer to what it might have been, then you get a better impression. And it's a bit the same with guitar too, honestly. Like, I don't know if I don't always, Ponce on, a really modern guitar, like Smallman, can be really good and impressive on a unique individual standpoint of their player, but also I kind of prefer it on a traditional guitar. I think there's more colors. But with other composers, like if it was Bogdanovich, I kind of prefer it sometimes on a more modern guitar, where the sound really does pop and there's this clarity.
Yeah.
So
for sure. I think also the early music and modern, like contemporary music pairing makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of parallels, and it's not a coincidence that so many guitarists, classical guitarists who play early music also play contemporary music. And then it's sort of, I feel like the guitar world is like this, like these brackets, and then there's the people who play the stuff in the middle. There's always crossover, but I don't know if you've ever noticed it, but people who play contemporary music almost always play early music too. It's interesting.
Yeah. Have you ever heard? I mean, you've heard of Raphael Andia,
Yeah.
the French. He's has Baroque guitar, and he's also got commissioned a lot of new works for modern guitar, and
yeah,
really interesting his work.
Yeah, for sure. So Matilda says Giuliani. Okay, well, on Matilda's show we were talking about Giuliani and how neither of us really like Giuliani, and we got a little trouble with people in the chat. So I'm not gonna.
Well, that's also the issue, is that I think during the classical period there were these stars, stars who were international acclaim. Like if you follow like the Viennese school of like Mozart and Haydn and Beethoven, it's like everybody in that period, Beethoven was copying Mozart, in his early period. He was totally just imitating that standard style and then playing off of it. But a lot of guys like Giuliani, they have to deal with Beethoven's shadow, and with, maybe they're listening to Schubert sometimes, but it's still like Schubert was, just foreshadowed by Beethoven. And I think that's just it. The history of understanding also who was important at the time is just as important as understanding who's important now.
Yeah.
Right.
For sure. Yeah. Just to circle back also to the question of who to listen to, I have been obsessively listening to, I don't know if you like his recordings, but Pascal Roche, like Els Debussy and Ravel recordings.
Oh yeah, he's great.
Amazing. And also for me, I was just listening to them earlier today because I think they're amazing, but there's this band called Jaga Jazzist, which is like a experimental jazz band from Sweden, I think. Yeah, I think they have like 12 or 13 members, so I'm not going to name all of the musicians in that group.
Yeah.
And there is one or two guitarists in there, but a lot of it's like wind, and they have a lot of electronic elements too and stuff, but just like very creative, very cool, and like a large ensemble that has kind of a collective sound, but they anyways, they produce really amazing stuff, and it's just it's really nice to listen to a group of musicians working outside of the tradition that I'm used to of like how we read notation, how we prepare for a performance, and listening to this group of people do at a very high level of proficiency do something with a totally different approach is refreshing. So I think that helps,
super interesting,
us rethink the way we do things. Jacob Bangso is asking, what did you mix the Owens with? What did you mix the Owens with behind you? The box of the liquor. There's a liquor box next to you, I guess.
Oh no, that's not mine, I'm afraid. I'll have to ask, but I think usually like tonic water, maybe.
Right. Okay. Nice. Yeah. Great. Wonderful. Okay, so we've solved the future of the guitar. Yeah, I mean, I'm
Solve the future of the guitar.
yeah,
That's great.
exactly. Yeah. I mean, the
Yeah,
future.
I've
Yeah.
for a while I was just listening to a lot of Yamandu Costa too, even
Right.
just on a guitaristic level. I think it's really interesting how he pulls it off, you know. And there's a lot that we can take there from classical guitarists.
For sure. 100%. Um, you have quite a bit of involvement with the GFA. Do you want to tell me about your like relationship with that organization and what they're up to and you know?
Yeah. So yeah, the GFA, besides the competitions, I mean, after the competitions, um, I started helping uh, Lynn McGrath do the youth competitions. And so I was helping to organize those and run those, and it worked out quite well because I got to know a lot of really great young players, and we'd
Awesome.
set up like youth socials, and we'd play games, and we'd make sure everybody's cool, and we deal with helicopter parents and all that kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah.
So it started with that kind of thing, and I really enjoyed that because I really like seeing these young kids who are just pure. They're really like, despite the fact that their parents might be like, take it home for the country, son.
Right.
They're just like telling each other like, oh, what's your name? Yeah, I like guitar too.
Yeah, exactly. Which
they're
is
just totally,
that's 100% more valuable for them in the long run than winning a prize, right? Like the people
yeah.
they meet at the festival, that's the number one rule, right? That's way more important than what happens with the jury.
Yes.
So
Yeah. And I think that conversation between different countries, like you see the style of players in different parts of the world is
yeah,
fascinating, and it's a communication of ideas when it gets to that point, and they're already like young enough that they can understand that to a certain extent, and that we're trying to find values within that, and so I started doing the youth competition, and then after that I got a job at Cal State Fullerton, where my colleague is Martha Masters.
cool.
And she's been roping me in a little bit here and there. But yeah, and I started running the GFA TV, and I did that for the last semester, and inviting people, where Michael was also nice enough to be on.
That was fun.
And which was basically a video series, a pedagogical series for some of the guitar societies that have popped up around the United States in the last 10 or 20 years. And there's been some really successful ones who are working towards integrating guitar into school programs, where the guitar is really, like I said, the poor man's instrument. School programs, they look at that and they're like, wow, this is affordable. We can do this. We just get 50 of the same guitars, and then we get a deal for a bulk order and all that stuff. And so some of those programs have been struggling, and this is meant to be sent out to them, and that their students are supposed to watch it and sometimes do some homework assignments or things like that. And it's just for anybody else who wants to listen to it and hear about it. And I learned some interesting things from guitarists who were on that show.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've been doing that, and that just puts me on staff. But besides that, not much. I enjoy the convention. I enjoy seeing friends that I haven't seen in a while after the GFA tour. It's like you stay in somebody's house and they host you for a while, and I host you over here. And then it's like an extended family, and it's really good to have this convention that kind of brings people within a really spaced out country together. Which is what we don't have. Like, whereas in France, you can kind of just go to Paris and see a lot of really great concerts and meet other guitarists, and there's like a central hub for it all. But that's just not the case in the US. So it's been my coming back into the community. The GFA is that for me, is a way to get in touch with my community.
Yeah, cool. It seems like a great organization. I've unfortunately never been to a GFA, but I was hoping to go to one or two once I graduated from the master's here and sort of was more set up working, but then the pandemic happened. So flying from Europe to America.
That's too much.
yeah. But
and they're all online anyways. It's online this year too. So
exactly. But when it's physical again, I'll go in the future. And it seems like a great organization and thing. And the GFA TV thing was really cool too, because it was really nice to feel like it was a kind of a way to help give back a little bit for people who might be struggling with the fact that they can't go to their local guitar events or see their teacher in person or whatever. And I know a lot of us are teaching online, and you can still do so much with online teaching, but it's just nice to be able to sort of like contribute to people's education in some small way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I send them to my students sometimes because I'm just like, whoa, this guy explained this thing way better than I could. And
Right. Well, we all explain things differently. That's why I'm thrilled when my students get to watch something from someone else or go to a master class or whatever, because it's like, it's like, yeah. And they might hear something that I've been saying, but I didn't say it in the way that made sense to them. And then they hear someone else say it and they're like, oh, get it now, That happens for sure. Frank says, Javier is a cool guy. He was nice enough to chat with me and my daughter about Suzuki guitar after his Sarasota performance a few years back. Great performance in an intimate setting. Glad you were doing well, Javier. Nice. Awesome. Well, it's clear.
I remember that concert. Yeah.
Nice. It's clear that you've left.
I think they left me outside, and it was like they left me and my guitar outside. I was like waiting to go on stage. It was really weird.
Oh, that's funny.
And I was out of tune when I got on.
Yeah.
Never mind.
Sometimes
performance.
Yeah, there's always those things where you get put in a certain setting and it just happens. And I remember we played, when I did that tour I was mentioning before, we played in this town that had never had a guitar concert before, but they had like a tiny little chamber music society that had sprung up recently, and they agreed to host us, and which was hilarious because it was a program of like all new contemporary Canadian music for like the first time hearing classical guitar in like small town Ontario. But they like had us in this church, and it was kind of cold outside, so they were like, should we turn like the wood stove on? And they were like, it'll probably be really warm if we do. And I was like, well, I'd rather be really warm than really cold while playing. So I said yeah, turn the stove on. And then it was like way hotter than I expected, and I was just like drenching myself in the guitar, and like I felt bad for the audience, but like you can't from the stage be like, I was wrong about the heating, like it doesn't...
Please turn it on. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah,
I know what you mean.
Yeah,
I've done a few of those myself where it's just way too hot.
Yeah, but again, I guess it's better than being too cold. But anyhow, awesome. Well, if people have any last minute questions, please put them in the chat, because I think we're approaching the end here. Is there anything else you want to add, Javier? I thought we could end with the Ponce Folias, but do you have anything else you want to address?
No, I don't think so. Unless somebody had some questions, but otherwise my mind's blank.
Nice. That's good. I'm glad I could empty your mind. Then you're ready to fill it again. Awesome. We'll give people a minute here to put any questions they have in the chat, because sometimes there's a delay in the stream. But I really appreciate you making the time to come on. This has been wonderful. And
yeah, this is so fun. Really, it's awesome that you have this show going on.
It's been a good time.
When's the next? Because you have Mark on next week, right?
Mark Wilson next week. Oh yeah, this is a good reminder, because I'm supposed to plug everybody, and I always forget to do it at the end of the show. I have Mark next week, and then following that, there's a question, but I'm just gonna find here. Following Mark, I have Dua Hibla, which are two Italian guitarists, Stefano Vivaldini and Roberto Canuso, and Stefano also composes. Wonderful duo. They're going to be on the 26th. So next week is Mark, then there's a week off, and we have Dua Hibla after that. Chaz is asking, right. Sorry, Chaz, you asked this before, and I just missed it. My bad. He or she is asking, have you had someone say, oh, you do that, in a negative sense whenever you tell them what you do for a living? How do you respond? So how do you respond to people being negative about your job?
I mean, I'm kind of very accepting of the ignorance at the same time.
Right.
I mean, usually I'll just say, if it's with somebody who I suspect is completely outside of music and classical music and in general, I'll say that I'm a music teacher or I'm a musician. Yeah, and that's a little bit easier, and I identify with that more than I think being a guitarist, because I want to be a musician first and then a guitarist. And then we can get into explaining exactly what kind of instrument I play later.
Yeah.
But
I agree.
But I feel like, no, if somebody responds in such a way, is it really worth your effort to try to change their mind? I mean, it seems pretty close-minded.
Yeah, I agree. If they're going to judge you for that, it's like, well, probably not going to get too far in that conversation. But I tend towards calling myself a guitarist first and then saying I mainly play classical guitar, you know, because then if they're like, oh, what's that? I can be like, well, it's maybe not what you think. I play a lot of contemporary. Anyways, it's, you know, it's easier than saying I'm a classical guitarist by profession, because then they're like, what do you do for that, you know? But if you say you're a guitarist, they're like, oh, he probably teaches some lessons and performs some concerts, and, you know, it's a little easier
exactly. Yeah.
Anyhow, Hope is asking, have you ever had to deal with injuries like repetitive strain injury and stuff like that?
Yeah, you know, interestingly enough, when I was doing competitions, it was like at a certain point I really didn't. I mean, when I was doing them and they were kind of working and I was trying to finish them at a certain, I was like, okay, I gotta do bigger competitions and then that's it. Because once you do bigger competitions, there's really no point in doing more. If you know, there's a certain point, enough is enough, and you should move on to just a regular life as an artist. But during that end point where I was practicing a lot for the GFA or for the Tokyo competition, I was stressing myself out. And I was stressing myself out because there's a lot of money on the line, because there's a lot of stake on hold, and sometimes it takes travel to get there. And it's kind of like gambling. It's kind of like you're putting all this stuff up front and you're all the time, all the money, and you're hoping for a return, but you can't be guaranteed a return. You can't even expect a return, really. And so that caused me a lot of stress. And I think during the, you know, towards the end of doing competitions, I was only, and before GFA, like 6 months before it, I was only practicing a few hours a day, and I was doing the rest of my practice just reading scores and internally. And that was working as long as I, you know, held off my hands, because I could feel them responding to the stress and the repetitiveness of playing rep over and over again. And once I cut competitions, I really never had it anymore. But it was also, it also meant me developing kind of a better sense of breathing with my instrument. And as soon as I developed a more natural technique for breathing with my instrument, I stopped having any sort of problem altogether.
It's also an issue of like the mindset you're in when you play for a competition versus play for a concert. I feel like that translates at some level to how your hands respond, you know?
Yeah, I had one friend describe it as like, you're up there in the final round and you're playing, and all of a sudden things aren't going well. And you can just feel the money slipping through your fingers.
Yeah, exactly.
Just not the right mindset really at all, but it's like, that was a funny analogy.
Yeah. Oh man, yeah. I'm happy that I'm in a way I'm happy that I was never successful enough to rely on it financially, because it sounds like a lot of stress. It sounds like it's not even worth putting up. Like, even if you are successful, it sounds like it's kind of brutal to live with that mental like stress.
Yeah.
Of, you know, I don't know. Kudos on you for making it through.
It's unnatural. Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't think I could deal with much more though, honestly.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, you're probably better off now doing all the projects you're doing and playing concerts when you can, when the pandemic will allow it and all that. So, yeah. Anyhow,
because it's also being a soloist, you shouldn't have any. I remember Arthur Rubinstein talking about this in like this late interview with him, and he's like, if you're a soloist, there's nobody else in the world. I mean, there's no comparing yourself to your colleagues. That thought cannot even pass your head. There's just, you know, the universe that you're creating. And I feel like to do competitions, that thought will inevitably creep in because of the strategies we talked about before.
Yeah.
Comparative strategies.
Yeah, and it's also just exhausting being in the comparative mindset. I remember finishing the masters, even in school, even if you don't do competitions, you're still thinking comparatively. To some extent, it's healthy and helpful in the sense that you're trying to push yourself by learning from your peers and competing in a healthy way, maybe in terms of like seeing what they can do and trying to replicate that or do better, quote unquote better. But finishing school and sort of being like, wow, now I can just like perform when I have the chance, record things when I feel like I want to, and I don't have to compare myself to someone else all the time. As long as I can allow myself to sort of also realize that like I need to stop mentally putting myself in that space when I put things out there. You know, the space of like,
and you'll start playing better that way.
Yeah, but it's so liberating, and just like there is, I think there's like a period when that happens where you like kind of can go off the deep end of not practicing as much because you're just like, wow, I don't have to like compare myself. But in the end, I think it's more healthy because you practice for better reasons and you're not going to push yourself to the point of, it's.
I know when I started, when I was younger and started doing competitions, and I really saw it as a great way to improve. And it was like there were goals that I set, and they were sort of deadlines, and it was great. But
Mhm.
towards the end of it, that was where really I saw that it's not sustainable, it's not functioning, and I wasn't getting better. I was maybe getting worse towards my
Yeah.
last year of doing competitions, and I saw that very clearly, and that was the sign to stop. Because
Right.
then as soon as I stopped, I got better again, and I feel like I'm
Mm.
still getting better, and I want to. And that's my goal in the end, is to
Mhm.
get a little better every day. But
Yeah, I think they're a tool, and they can be a useful tool. It's just they're not an
yes,
end. They're a means.
yeah,
They're not an end. You know, and
tool can be used badly, or it can be used well.
yeah,
Absolutely.
and it's not the end game, and it's not the only tool either. So yeah.
Mhm.
Anyhow,
Mhm.
Mark says, "Great interview. Really enjoyed hearing Javier's ideas. Thanks, Mark. You're on in the hot seat next week." So, Filip Alilovich says, but even people who don't know classical guitar before enjoy it. Many people love the quote unquote alien way we do it. Definitely, yeah. Yeah, I wasn't trying to say that saying you're a classical guitarist gives a negative connotation. I was just saying, like, when I tell people what I do for a living, it's kind of easier for them to conceive of what it is if I say I'm a guitarist first. I don't know. Yeah, but maybe it's better just to
Yeah,
use it
but
as,
it's probably true in your case as well. If you
Mhm.
you know if you play a little bit of electric, and you see yourself that way too, like if you're
Mhm.
not bound by those limitations, then
Mhm.
that's important. And
Definitely.
and yeah, I try to see my instrument the same thing, as it's a tool, it's a partner that I go through it with, but I'm the musician here, and I could be playing something else and doing that
Mhm.
instead, but I don't. I play guitar.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's to avoid confusion, but I do agree with you. Like if you can sit down and play with them, and sometimes play for them, and sometimes they're like, "Whoa, how did you do that? Like, why
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
your fingers moving that way? I've never seen anything like it."
Mhm.
So
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I I always when they do ask the question like, well, what is classical guitar? I'm like, well, it's playing the guitar in a way that the vast majority of people don't, right? It's playing melody and accompaniment simultaneously, operating in
yeah,
both those spheres simultaneously, whereas usually the guitar is occupying one. Obviously, that's a bit technical for some people, but
yeah,
if you break it down enough, they can kind of like see what you mean, right? So anyhow,
right, yeah, yeah.
yeah. Chaz says, thank you guys very much. I appreciate you both, and we appreciate you. So thanks for sticking around. And Adam Ciccoletti says, just saying hi, wish I could watch live. I'll catch you both later. That's great. And last question we're going to address here. Hope says, I guess that raises the question, how much do you practice and with what sort of routine? Is that even
Yeah,
possible
that's a
to
good
answer?
question. Yeah, it's possible. I think that the true end goal for, and this is why we talk about the competition side of things too, true end goal is that as an artist, eventually your art becomes melded with your life itself, and that you're not, even when you're not playing guitar, you're putting some mindfulness towards what you're doing, and but also while playing guitar, you see yourself as not a guitarist. So I think that after a while, it's not like the amount of practice isn't important. There are plenty of technical things that you have to get through and get the job done on time. But it's also about not stressing yourself out, not doing too much than your body is capable of. And to do
Mm-hmm.
that, you have to listen to yourself. You have to hear yourself and your body, and what is it saying to you. And if you really feel motivated to practice all day long, and it doesn't seem to matter, then do it. But if you're like busy with other things, and just practicing that day is somehow stressful, or seems like you just need to get in the time, that's not the right mindset. Because what will
Mm-hmm.
happen is that you'll be practicing for the worst, and for the worst part of it, you'll be you might not be doing better for yourself. And I do see it as really an important thing, where you sit down with your guitar, every note counts, and that time is important, and that time is valuable, no matter if it's long or short. And so
Mm-hmm.
if you have more time, but you feel like you're just running through the time, then maybe you should also stop there and just give yourself a break and think about it, so that you can sit down more mindfully, and approach it in a more positive way next time. Because
Definitely.
it's really not like all these myths about how much time people practice or how much time people need to practice. It's just complete crap.
Yeah,
And
I agree.
it doesn't work that way.
Mm-hmm. It's also like I like what you said about there's a certain amount of like work you have to do to get the job done on time, and it might not be a sexy way to think about it, but like it is an equation a lot of the time, and life is short. You only have so much time on this planet before your life is over, you know.
Yeah.
And so, first of all, you have to enjoy your life. Otherwise, you're not going to have anything to put forward on stage artistically. You know, like it's just not going to be
Yeah.
there. And
Yeah.
secondly, like, do you want to live a miserable life and just be really good at the instrument? And thirdly, once you're at a certain level of technical proficiency, which of course sometimes takes very grueling times of technique work or like lots of practice when you're in school at certain periods, whatever. But once you're at a certain level of technical proficiency, it's just a matter of an equation of what do you need to do to get the job done, you know? And
You know your methods, you know your tools, and you apply them.
yeah, and I think it's also it. You know how you have to know when something is good enough, even if it doesn't achieve your level of what would please you as a
Yeah.
perfectionist, because we're all trained to be perfectionists, you know. But
You know what? I think that has taught me to forgive myself in my own life
yeah,
more
yeah,
than one time over. Is that when I get up to the date and I wanted it to be better, but it's not, and I just have to forget about all the work I did and just be in the moment and play on stage,
mm-hmm.
then that takes forgiving yourself over maybe not practicing as much as you thought you should have. I mean, already those thoughts are not worth it, but it's that's
Mm-hmm.
something that I see in other people, in musicians. They have in stride that they're able to forgive themselves.
Yeah, for sure. And it's also part of, I think that's part of, not that I'm an expert on this per se, because I'm still, you know, sort of figuring it out myself and probably will be for the rest of my life, but part of becoming a professional too is learning that lesson to an even greater extent, because you leave school and you have a real life. You got to pay your bills. If you're lucky enough to do it all through music, you got to do a lot of teaching, a lot of maybe some recording work for other people if you have the tools to do that. Whatever ways you use to make money within guitar, that takes time away from practice. And so you start to learn like what is that number of time, amount of time that you can do to achieve the goal in an artistically satisfying way, and how are you still going to balance that with enjoying your life, not getting burnt out, you know, especially as you get older. After you pass 30 like I've done, it gets harder to not burn out. So anyhow, it's all very difficult, but it's not necessarily something that like musical studies for young people really like prepares you for, you know. I don't know.
No, yeah, they should really teach that in schools. That'd be much more valuable sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
How to balance your practice with your life. Yeah.
yeah, or how to pay your taxes, how to budget,
Right.
things like they should
Yeah.
really be teaching in
Yeah.
school.
We probably shouldn't go down the business route. That's a whole other.
Yeah,
That's a whole other.
that means we
podcast.
should cut it.
Yeah, let's cut it there. I'm still finishing my taxes for last year. Got an extension, so anyhow, let's leave it there. Thank you everyone for watching. This has been wonderful, and Ricardo Saebs, this great conversation. Thanks, really enjoyed it. Thank you, Ricardo, for sticking around. I think I actually owe Ricardo a message because he was wondering about coming on the show, and I just haven't gotten around to getting back to him, but it will happen. Thank you, Javier. This has been awesome.
Thank you, Michael. This is really fun.
Yeah, we're gonna listen. Sorry.
Yeah. No, just nice hearing everybody in the comments too, even though I don't see them.
Yes, exactly.
It's like there's more than just us here.
There's like 18 people right now, apparently. It's crazy. Okay, so we're going to finish off to you playing one of the largest pieces in our repertoire, the Ponce La Folia Variations. So do you want to say anything about this, or should I just roll the tape?
No, it was just live for my master's recital. Last concert I did before the pandemic hit.
Oh, nice. Okay. What a way to bring in the pandemic, this piece. Oh my gosh. Crazy. Okay. Thank you everyone for watching. Tune in next week for Mark Wilson. Hope says, thanks for answering all my questions. Amazing interview. You're welcome, Hope, anytime. You can be here every Saturday, and I will do my best to get all your questions answered. All right. Thanks, Javier. We're going to listen to some Ponce, and I will see you all next week.